Do you know who you're bringing for Easter? Have you invited somebody for Easter? Easter is a season. Easter is a service where even folks who would say, I don't know that I want to subscribe to everything religious people subscribe to, but I might go on Easter. It is worth making the ask. We are in the season of Lent where we turn our attention to the disciplines of following Jesus. We look at the reality of what Jesus has called us to in discipleship. And where he said to us, his disciples, if anybody would come after me, they must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow after me. And so there's different ways that can look, but we give our attention especially to those disciplines in the season of Lent. In this season, we are looking in the scriptures at what does it mean to turn our eyes on Jesus? What does it mean to focus our attention on Jesus? And you guys know it's getting harder and harder to focus our attention because each of us has a weapon of mass distraction in our pockets. The endless scroll, the ready-at-hand games. We have all kinds of stuff to entertain ourselves. And so it becomes harder and harder as we live in this world and saturated in the technologies of this world. It becomes harder and harder to focus on anything, let alone focusing on Jesus. But during the season of Lent, we're giving attention to what does it mean to focus on Jesus. And we come to Palm Sunday, which is one of those Sundays where we can do all kind of stuff. I mean, we're cutting off tree branches and giving them to kids and having them carried around in church. You never know what's going on. One year we had the kids come in and as a sign of celebration, part of our cultural recognition of a celebration is confetti. Anybody love confetti? Anybody love cleaning up confetti? Yeah, that's what every grown-up thought is. The kids come through the sanctuary and, woo, Jesus come in. You can see it on everybody's face. Who's going to clean this up? Pastor said, guess what, friends? Do you want children's ministry? We're going to clean it up together. It's going to be a shared experience. And they were so kind that while the pastor was cleaning up in the back nooks and corners of the sanctuary, he did not notice the parade of people going into his office with hands full of confetti and coming out with hands empty of confetti. And for years, and even once in a while still today, there will be a book that is set on the shelf for a while. And when it's opened, out will come a single piece of confetti. Just a reminder, Pastor, who's going to clean all this up? Well, it's going to be all of us. Palm Sunday is kind of awesome because pastors can get away with stuff that you couldn't get away with any other day of the year. But you know, Palm Sunday has another name. We get excited for Palm Sunday. Jesus riding into Jerusalem, the celebration. Palm Sunday, though, has another name. And it sometimes goes by the name Passion Sunday. You could call it Suffering Sunday. The beginning of Holy Week and remembering what comes in Jesus' walk toward Jerusalem and the suffering in Gethsemane as Jesus sits around the table with his disciples and he knows what's coming and they do not. And we hear his words differently because we know how this story goes. We'll line up for a Palm Sunday. Passion Sunday, maybe not so much. But I want to invite you this morning as we come to the word of the Lord to turn our attention to Jesus in the moment of his suffering for us on the cross. In his words, cried out while he hangs on the cross for your sins and my sins. We're going to give our attention to that from Matthew's Gospel, beginning in chapter 27 at verse 32. I'd invite you to stand as we hear the word of the Lord. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. At about 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar and put it on a staff and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. It's these words that stop me. My God, why have you forsaken me?" There's some of the words of Jesus that come to us in a verbatim kind of way. Not that the others aren't, but Jesus would have spoken a language called Aramaic, which is a derivative of Hebrew. The Gospels are recorded for us in Greek and then translated by King James and those who came after. Now, King James didn't translate it. He paid somebody to translate it. But all the translations come down to us through the Greek. But the Gospel writers have preserved a couple of instances of words of Jesus from his native Aramaic. Abba, Father. That's pretty important. Talitha kumi, little girl, I say to you, get up. That was important enough that the gospel writer said, we're gonna keep this in here. And then this cry of the Lord Jesus on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I wonder what that question does when it hits your ears. What does that question do inside of you? Do you know what Jesus is talking about? When Lisa and I moved to Kansas City, we were newlyweds, and right about the same time, her mother, Diane, took a pastorate in Gloucester, Mississippi. Diane had served as a staff pastor at their home church in Sanford, Florida for a number of years, and right about this time, they relocated to Gloucester, Mississippi. I was explaining to a guy at a senior adult luncheon. He was one of these guys that looked like he was born old. You ever met anybody like that? Don't look around. You ever met anybody look like they was born old? And we were describing Lisa's mom and her kindness. She's just the mom to everybody. And her dad, who's like the biggest redneck in the world. And they're relocating from their hometown where generations and generations and generations and generations of the family have lived to Gloucester, Mississippi, which is not as big as what you think it is. A parent of Bryson. So we were describing to this guy, Gloucester, Mississippi, rural southwestern Mississippi. He said just up the road, there's a claim to fame up the road about 15 minutes from Gloucester. There's a town called Liberty, Mississippi that was made famous by a comedian named Jerry Clower. I would not have known about Jerry Clower except that he lived in the same county and his whole thing was telling old stories. You know Jerry Clower? Who knows a Jerry Clower? Oh man, come on. If you don't know of Jerry Clower, if you're feeling a little bit down, Jerry Clower does not have a small personality. He's about as subtle as a firecracker. And he's one of the most wonderful storytellers I have heard. And so I started listening to his albums. The best preaching advice I got was listen to good storytellers and pay attention. Jerry Clower, so I'm telling this guy at the table, up the road, there's a guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, Jerry Clower. He's a comedian, he's a southern comedian, he's country as cornbread. And he said, I know Jerry Clower. Come on, city slicker. And it's coming from, and a Yankee to boot. Now we're in Kansas City. There is nothing like southern country, and like this is not who. So I started telling him about the coon dog stories. I started telling him about the Ledbetter family that actually exists in that county. It's kind of like melon camps around Seymour. Are you related? Yes, we're related. The Ledbetters, they're real people. And I'm telling him about, because I'm like, come on, why would you have any reason to know? And he said again, I know Jerry Clower. USS Bennington. She don't mean nothing to me. Did to him. He and Jerry served in the Navy in World War II. They were on the USS Bennington together, and he said if you were on patrol with Jerry Clower, you never stopped laughing. That guy couldn't talk, but he'd be telling stories, telling jokes. He was working material that he'd become famous for. He was working at even back in his Navy days. I know Jerry Clower. Any of you know Jerry Clower? Probably not like he did. I know him. Every couple of years, we go down and spend a week or two. Real nice house. Yeah, I bet. Probably nicest house in the county. There's a difference between knowing about someone and knowing someone. There's a kind of familiarity, and then there's intimacy. Remind me of the saying, only a woman who's given birth without an epidural can truly understand the suffering of a man that has a cold. There is knowing about suffering, and then there is knowing it. Now, you know, several years ago, I decided to take a bike ride with my dog, and I had her wrapped around my wrist, and that was a great idea. Gave my surgeon a couple of payments toward his boat. destroyed my shoulder. And I was in one of these things for a while. And it's a different kind of sling. It's not the kind of sling where you break your arm. That looks different. This one's got a pillow, and it comes with a squishy ball. And there's a place for it in there. And you know what I've noticed is, because I've had the experience with this on my shoulder, I will see slings like this, and I just got to ask, what'd you do? What'd you do? I was going to pastor's retreat, and there's a pastor's husband up from Connorsville. And what'd you do? Shoulder reconstruction. Oh, that's terrible. That's awful. How do you sleep? Like, sleeping's awful. Like, and showering's awful. And getting dressed is, like, all of the things you have to do every day, it's awful. When that joint is messed up, it is bad. Guy back in Enter His Courts, passing out flyers, and I see a guy, and I go, shoulder? Rotator cuff? What do you got? I don't know. You have that happen to you, you're inaugurated into the old man's club. But you see it. You see somebody with this, and you go, I don't know about what you're going through. I know. I have walked that. I have intimate understanding of what this means. And so I wonder, in the cry of Christ on the cross, do you know that cry? Is there something in your life that rings with a kind of resonance and a kind of intimacy with what Jesus was saying? And I don't want to unpack his words to explain it to you and make sense of it to you. I want to ask you, do those words and does that pain? Is there a place in here that you know that cry? When Jesus was dying on the cross, he was going someplace that all of us will go if the Lord tarries. There is an experience of suffering and there is an experience of dying that is common to humanity. And Jesus walked that road when he didn't have to. But he walked that road for you and for me. And he carried that pain, not because he had to, but because he chose to. It is because it is within the character of God and it is within the character of Jesus Christ to draw close to pain and suffering and to take it up into his own person and to walk with it faithfully before God. Jesus knows something about you because of his suffering. Jesus knows something about you because of his suffering to the point of death. Jesus understands the experience of being forsaken by God and being abandoned and being betrayed. Jesus understands. Jesus knows you because of the pain he carried. And you can know something of Jesus because of your experience of suffering and pain. There is a commonality in human suffering. There is something about it that separates us. There is something about the experience of pain that just in itself can make us feel extremely lonely. And there is something about our experience of pain that binds us together as people. It is part of the human experience that we cannot escape no matter what the Tylenol commercials say. There is something in our hearts in the experience of suffering that reaches the ears of the Lord Jesus Christ. and he understands. Most of you know my wife Lisa is a nurse in the emergency room. And one of the most painful experiences one of the most painful conditions that come into the ER is kidney stones. It's not man flu. It's almost as bad as man flu. But she said a person coming in, there is a certain posture of being doubled over. There is a certain intensity to the pain. There is a certain, there is the inability to find relief that is common across the folks that are coming in for kidney stones. And she said there is almost a commonality in the kind of groan that we hear from the person that makes a doctor and makes a nurse that knows what they're doing go, we better check that guy for kidney stones, right? Some of you are kidney stone survivors, know what I'm talking about. That there is something about that groan. You go, okay, we're going to check everything, but make sure we check this. I want to tell you, in your cry of disappointment, in your cry of suffering, and in your cry of abandonment, you are not alone. In your pain, you can be confident Jesus understands. Jesus knows. And just as you have wondered, where is God in the middle of this? Even Jesus, the Son of God, has asked that question that is on your heart, maybe even this morning. I want to tell you, Jesus knows you. Jesus knows me. That is so important. But I also want to tell you this morning that you can know Jesus. In your sufferings, when you look to the crucified Jesus on the cross, there is something because of your suffering that you will understand about him that you could not have understood otherwise. I think of the theologian Jürgen Moltmann, was a Nazi soldier in World War II, and he wasn't Nazi by conviction. He was Nazi because that's what you had to be to get a job. But he was captured in an Allied concentration camp, was shown pictures of the Jews that had been rounded up, dying by the thousands in concentration camps. For him and for the colleagues of his, there was a very tangible despair that set in. And they started giving up hope and dying because they didn't realize they were giving their life for that. They thought they were giving their life for some kind of higher ideals, but they didn't realize they'd been co-opted for that. But Moltmann had been given a New Testament. And as he thumbed through it in the concentration camp, it was the cry of Christ on the cross that was a converting moment for him. The person who cried this out understands what is going on inside of me. And I want to tell you this morning, the one who cried out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? That is the one who knows you. And you can know him. As the band comes forward, I'd invite you to read these two verses together with me from Philippians chapter 3. I want to know Christ. Yes, to know the power of his resurrection in participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, attaining to the resurrection of the dead. I want to know Christ. And the way that we know him, the way that we grow closer to him, is to know him and to be drawn close to him through his sufferings. And through our sufferings to know that he endured agony willingly for you. I just wonder this morning, do you know Jesus?